Welcome to meeting number 3 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on International Trade. The Board of Internal Economy requires that committees adhere to the following health protocols, which are in effect until February the 28th, 2022. Anyone with symptoms should participate by Zoom and not attend the meeting in person. Masks must be worn in committee rooms except when members are at their place during parliamentary proceedings. However, it is strongly recommended that members wear a mask even when they are at their place during parliamentary proceedings. All those inside the committee room should follow best practice of maintaining a physical distance of at least 2 meters from others and maintain proper hand hygiene by using the hand sanitizer provided in the committee room and regularly wash your hands well with soap. As the chair, I will enforce these measures, and I thank you very much for your consideration. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November the 24th, 2021. I'd like to outline a few rules to follow. Interpretation services are available. You may speak in the official language of your choice. At the bottom of your screen, you have the choice of either Floor, English, or French. If interpretation is lost, please inform me immediately, and we will ensure interpretation is properly restored before resuming the proceedings. The raise hand feature is on the main toolbar should you wish to speak. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When you're not speaking, your microphone should be on mute. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. The committee clerk and I will maintain a speaking list, of course, for all of the members. So, we are commencing a study on the Canada-United States relationships and its impact on the electric vehicle, softwood lumber, and other sectors. With us today by video conference are Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association, Gianpaolo Vecchio, General Counsel, Canada's Building Trades Union, Sean Strickland, Executive Director, and Canada Vehicle Manufacturers Association, Brian Kingston, President and Chief Executive Officer. And from Electric Mobility Canada, Danielle Breton, President and Chief Executive Officer, and Toyota Motor Manufacturing Canada, Inc., Scott McKenzie, Senior National Manager, External Affairs. And from Unifor, we have Angelo Di Caro, Director of Research, and Shane Wark, Assistant to the National President. Welcome all. Up to 5 minutes will be given for opening remarks, after which we will proceed with rounds of questions. Mr. Vecchio, I now invite you to make your opening statement. Please make sure that you do. I will have to cut you off after 5 minutes. So, Mr. Vecchio, please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. My name is Gianpaolo Vecchio, and I'm General Counsel of the APMA. Thank you for having me today. The Biden administration, Democratic leadership, and the United Auto Workers lobby in the U.S. worked together in 2021 to propose a $12,500 tax credit to consumers for electric vehicles made exclusively in the U.S. by 2027 via the Build Back Better bill, which is now stalled in the Senate. While we were very active in trying to get the Democrats to change the course on a policy instrument that we considered an existential threat to Canadian automotive, we do not celebrate its current demise. We know that the Biden administration is dedicated to bringing back in a form the legislation that they calculate will pass, and the threat of the incentive still hangs in the balance. The U.S., in our observation, has turned its bipartisan attention to a renewed protectionism under the threat of the rise of China, and the EV market is just one element of that focus. Since the proposal first saw its amendments authored by Senator Stabenow from Michigan, we've been working closely with the Canadian Embassy in Washington and directly with our congressional network in Washington to articulate to both sides of the aisle that this proposal will have an adverse effect on U.S.-based part suppliers. While we're Canada's National Trade Association for OEM suppliers to the global automotive manufacturing industry, the APMA also represents almost 40 companies that own and operate 156 factories in 18 U.S. states, employing 43,000 Americans. We have warned the American lawmakers that it was a discriminatory trade action that will affect the sector in both countries and would be challenged with vigor. The arguments against this proposal for Canadian interests have been well articulated and, for that matter, well defended by the federal government. The Prime Minister and the Trade Minister have been leads, and the APMA has conducted and supported meetings directly with Team Canada. However, our focus in Washington is to appeal to U.S. lawmakers to understand the damage they'd be doing to the U.S. auto sector in the hopes that this can gain some real traction for the cause down there. In Canada, we make 2 million vehicles a year and we buy 2 million a year in a normal non-pandemic year. In the US, they make 12 million annually, but buy 17 million. As a net importer of approximately 5 million vehicles, the country can accommodate an incredible amount of new production to replace imports it chooses to block. This is the simple math supporters of this bill are pursuing, but they are ignoring the way in which the automotive sector has been built over the last 100 years in our two countries. In Canada, the proposal would do irreparable harm to the US production investments. In addition to that fact, the three US-based automakers, allowing for Chrysler and Dodge's Parisian headquarters, make 1 million vehicles here annually for US consumers in a non-pandemic year. They also contain 50% US parts and 60% US raw materials. All told, 5 assemblers export 80% or 1.6 million vehicles a year from Canada to the US. They will be all hurt by this, especially their US suppliers. We have been clear to the White House in written communication that this is not a smart move if the objective or the goal is to boost American automotive fortunes. The CUSMA recently negotiated between US, Canada, and Mexico. We jointly agreed and introduced the highest regional value content minimums in history, designed to drive increased business to local auto parts and raw material suppliers. If the US passes this proposed tax credit scheme, it will nonsensically incentivize reducing purchases from US-based suppliers. A vehicle built in one US state, destined for another US state, does not cross a border, is not an export under the CUSMA, and is not subject to any RVC compliance requirements. Because of this, US-based vehicle assembly will surely reduce US content in pursuit of now permitted low-cost offshore parts alternatives for their vehicles. With no tariff threat used to source locally, the biggest winners in this fashion would be suppliers from countries like China, Vietnam, Malaysia, and other non-US interests. We've been very clear about this in our in-person lobby campaign on the Hill since November. As I reflect on some of the meetings that I've had with Senator Ossoff and Warnock from Georgia, the APMA's dozen or so meetings with senators and congressional reps from both parties, we know that there is time for the U.S. to reconsider its course of action. However, we've decided not just to focus on reminding them of their trading obligations to us, but to focus on the health and sustainability of the U.S. automotive parts sector, which we feel through this measure has been ignored in a misguided attempt to satisfy a special interest, single-purpose label partner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beshew. Mr. Strickland for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to provide some remarks on the Build Back Better legislation and the potential impact it could have on Canada's electric vehicle industry and how construction and building trades workers fit into that mix. My name is Sean Strickland. I'm Executive Director of Canada's Building Trades Unions, part of North America's Building Trades Unions. We represent 14 international construction unions with offices in Washington, D.C. and Ottawa. The combined membership of NAB2 and CBTU is over 3 million unionized construction workers, of which 600,000 are in Canada. The women and men of the building trades are employed constructing everything from small projects through to large multi-billion-dollar projects right across Canada. The construction and maintenance sector annually represents approximately 6% of Canada's GDP. Skilled trades workers are often later employed in the operation, renovation, maintenance, and repurposing of plants, factories, and facilities. Our members and contractors build it and maintain it. I want to commend the work of the government and the issue thus far for speaking up quickly and strongly against the EV credits, the potential harm they will cause. On behalf of Canada's building trade unions, we recommend the following. The Canadian government continue to advocate for the removal of electric vehicle tax credits that incentivize U.S.-made vehicles at the detriment of the Canadian automobile manufacturing industry. That we also develop a made-in-Canada supply chain from mining to the manufacturing floor for EV battery production to support our transition to net zero, and that the Canadian government continues to ensure the U.S. upholds their commitment to our existing trade agreements, including CUSMA, the roadmap for renewed U.S.-Canada partnership that was signed last year by President Biden and Prime Minister Trudeau, and the U.S.-Canada Critical Minerals Action Plan. Unfortunately, we all know, and as you've heard from previous speakers, President Biden and the U.S. administration is committed to protectionist measures like Buy America, more recently, Build Back Better. These protectionist measures aren't new. Canada and the U.S., throughout our long history and our relationship, have been dealing with trade matters and irritants despite agreements that have been signed by both countries. As Canadians, this is particularly frustrating. Yes, we are two countries, but for the automotive industry, it is one supply chain and mostly seamlessly integrated across both borders. And thousands of building trades, skilled trades workers are employed on both sides of the border, keeping the industry rolling. Small sample size, for example, in Canada, on average, building trades members work between 170,000 and 200,000 people hours at the Toyota plants in Cambridge and Woodstock, Ontario. This represents approximately $170 to $200 million in wages and benefits. Another 55,000 people hours at the GM plant in St. Catharines, in addition to thousands and thousands of more man hours in the automotive industry right across Ontario, Quebec, and the rest of Canada. The United States-Canada auto industry, as you know, is one of the most integrated industries in the world. In border areas such as Michigan and Ontario, a vehicle's auto parts routinely cross the border 6 times before final assembly. The business is worth at least $100 billion a year in trade between both nations. For these reasons and more, on the view of North America's building trade unions and Canada building trade unions, and on behalf of our 3 million strong workforce in both their countries, we believe Canada, and we are working hard, should be exempt from these U.S. EV credit provisions. Some additional considerations. Currently in Canada, our tax credit for purchasing electric vehicles applies to U.S.-made cars as well. The U.S. should do the same. The new EV tax credits include an additional credit for $4,500 for vehicles built at unionized plants. Unions are just as strong, and in some cases stronger, and labor standards just as equal as they are in the United States. So we're aligned. Canada is committed to a target of 100% of new automotive sales being zero emission by 2035. This is also aligned with U.S. climate goals. And interestingly, according to the American Automobile Labeling Act, it clearly identifies Canadian auto production as domestic production in the U.S. because of our interconnected relationship. When we look at these issues more closely, obviously we have more alignment than misalignment between the U.S. and Canada around the ultimate goal, which is the ultimate goal in this whole debate and discussion, is transitioning to low-emission vehicles and reducing the world's carbon footprint. Surely both countries can find a way to work more collaboratively on this EV tax credit issue to construct good policy that works for Canada, the U.S., and the environment. Moving beyond trade and towards the economies of the future, Canada must also develop the made in Canada supply chain from mining to the manufacturing floor for EV battery production. There's a large economic opportunity to position Canada as a leader in EV manufacturing and production while simultaneously reducing our carbon footprint to net zero. We need to continue to stand up for good Canadian jobs and fight unfair trade practices at every corner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Strickland. On to Mr. Kingston, please, for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members. Thank you for the invitation to take part in your study here today on the Canada-U.S. relationship and its impacts on the electric vehicle, softwood lumber, and other sectors. The Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association, CVMA, is the industry association representing Canada's leading manufacturers of light and heavy-duty motor vehicles. Our membership includes Ford Motor Company of Canada, General Motors of Canada Company, and Stellantis FCA Canada. CVMA members are at the forefront of new automotive investment in Canada. Over the past 2 years, Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis have announced $6 billion in investment, which will create 3,700 direct jobs and tens of thousands throughout the auto supply chain. Over $4 billion of that investment has been earmarked for electric vehicle assembly right here in Ontario. And these investments are part of an unprecedented technological transformation taking place right now in the auto industry. Automaker investments into electrification alone are estimated at US $515 billion over the next 5 to 10 years, with the number of EVs available to Canadians expected to reach more than 120 models by 2023. This transition to electrification is simply not possible without ambitious government efforts to address the well-documented barriers to EV adoption. Reducing the price gap between EVs and a traditional internal combustion engine vehicle is the single most powerful tool to help consumers make that switch to electric. For that reason, the CVMA is a strong supporter of proposals to spur the adoption of EVs. Without large-scale changes in consumer behavior supported by incentives, it will be impossible for the US or Canada to achieve their EV sales targets of 50% of new vehicle sales by 2030. Proposals like the US EV tax incentive in the Build Back Better Act will support the transition to EVs. But since we don't know what a revised US credit will look like, it's difficult to say at this point what the impact will be on Canadian production. We urge the federal government to undertake a detailed analysis of the US EV tax incentive on the auto industry to help inform potential solutions and proposals. And as you've heard from some of the previous witnesses, the auto industry is highly integrated throughout North America. And due to that highly integrated nature, the CVMA and our member companies support policies that align with and enhance further North American integration. Given the recently implemented CUSMA, there is a strong argument to be made for an EV incentive that supports CUSMA region EV production. At the same time, we should be taking actions now to support the transition to EVs and enhance our competitiveness as a manufacturing jurisdiction. Competition is fierce for job creating and investment, and we need to get serious about creating a competitive manufacturing environment. We recommend the following actions. First, match US EV adoption policies. It's critical that Canada's EV policies are aligned with those in the US to support the consumer transition to EVs, including on consumer incentives and charging infrastructure. Canada must be prepared to both continue and increase.
Madame la Présidente.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. The interpretation sound is considerably lower than in the original. Thank you very much.
Will you find out?
We'll do a quick test with the interpretation.
Can you say a few words, Mr. Kingston? We'll try the translation again.
Brian Kingston, Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association, coming to you from Ottawa.
The member could try increasing the volume.
He's supposed to have a headset. He's by Zoom.
Can we ask Mr. Savard-Tremblay if he has a headset?
Mr. Savard-Tremblay, do you have a headset there? Please put it on. Wonderful. Thank you very much.
We'll try it one more time.
So we'll try it one more time. Mr. Kingston, would you say a few words, please?
Testing. Brian Kingston, Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association, Ottawa, Ontario.
Okay, thank you. Is it okay, Mr. Savard-Tremblay, now?
Est-ce que vous pourriez juste...
Could you perhaps redo the test while talking at the same time, both English and French, because it's very difficult to make the distinction when there is a simultaneous interpretation?
Testing with the interpreters, testing simultaneous interpretation. For Mr. Savard-Tremblay, Mr. Savard-Tremblay, please let us know if you can hear the French translation well.
C'est beaucoup mieux, je vous remercie.
That is much better. Thank you very much.
Shall I continue, Madam Chair?
Hold on, Mr. Kingston, just making sure that we've got it clear for everyone. And please continue for another 2 minutes.
Thank you. So my first recommended action is to match US EV adoption policies. This includes consumer incentives and charging infrastructure. Canada must be prepared to both continue and increase its own consumer purchase incentive, IZEV, and invest more in charging infrastructure if we hope to keep pace with the United States, boost EV sales, and attract investment. Secondly, we must maintain regulatory alignment with the United States. While much attention has been given to the US EV tax credit and implications for manufacturing here in Canada, the federal government is currently advancing policies that are a more direct challenge to Canada's competitiveness as an EV manufacturing jurisdiction, introducing a regulated zero-emission vehicle sales mandate and/or a border carbon adjustment will take Canada out of long-standing regulatory alignment with the United States. Canada's seat at the North American automotive table and the hundreds of thousands of jobs the industry provides depends on this ongoing alignment. The policies being proposed are more immediate threats to automotive investment, jobs, and Canada's place in the emerging EV supply chain. With that, I thank you for the opportunity to address the committee and look forward to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kingston. Apologies for the interruption in your presentation. On to Mr. Breton, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Est-ce que vous m'entendez bien?
Can you hear me properly? Good afternoon. We would like to thank the members of the Standing Committee on International Trade for taking the time to study the potential impacts of the Build Back Better plan on the electric vehicle industry and its related sectors in Canada. We were founded in 2006 and is one of the world's leading organizations in transportation electrification. Our members include mining companies, manufacturers of off-road vehicles and light, medium, and heavy-duty vehicles, electricity and charging infrastructure providers, technology companies, research centers, cities, universities, fleet managers, unions, and environmental NGOs. So, Electric Mobility Canada is the voice for transportation electrification nationwide.
We supported the Canadian and U.S. government's agreement on the importance of the development of a zero-emission vehicle future and a battery strategy at the first bilateral meeting held virtually with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and U.S. President Joe Biden. As noted in their official statement, the leaders agreed to work together to build the necessary supply chains to make Canada and the U.S. global leaders in all aspects of battery development and production. To that end, the leaders agreed to strengthen the Canada-U.S. Critical Mineral Action Plan to target a net zero industrial transformation, batteries for zero-emission vehicles, and renewable energy storage. Later that year, the U.S. administration presented its Build Back Better plan with specific provisions on EVs. As soon as the plan was known, EMC was amongst those who alerted the Canadian government on the risk it could present to U.S.-Canada EV relations, to Canadian workers, and to the Canadian automotive industry in general. I will outline a few of the items in this plan that may be cause for concern. Adding another $500 for EV rebate using battery packs in which 50% of components, including cells, are made in the U.S. Since all EVs require battery packs, this means that the U.S. administration wants battery components to be made mainly in the U.S. This could hinder Canada's capacity to attract battery manufacturers to our country and therefore deprive us of a key part of the automotive industry of the future, battery development. Although Canada is not yet a critical mineral superpower, the potential is clearly there, with 31 critical minerals identified in Canada, experienced research teams, and our qualified workforce. Another item is $7,500 rebate will only apply to U.S.-made electric vehicles after the first 5 years, and this rebate will then be in place for another 5 years. Considering that 9 out of 10 vehicles built in Canada are sent to the U.S., this proposal clearly poses a threat to the future of the automotive industry in Canada, since almost all vehicle manufacturers are announcing the end of internal combustion engine production in the next few years. To demonstrate how fast the world market is adopting EVs, here's a few up-to-date information on some manufacturers' plan for EV production. GM is aiming at 100% EV production by 2035. Stellantis Chrysler is aiming for 100% EV production by 2028. Ford is aiming for 40% EV production by 2030. Nissan is aiming for 50% EV production by 2030. And VW is aiming for 50% EV production by 2030. And let's not forget the newer players like Tesla, Rivian, and others, which are already exclusively electric. Let's not forget the medium and heavy-duty sector as well. Companies such as Novabus, New Flyer, Lion Electric, Girardin, Taiga, Dana, and BYD are now making electric buses, school buses, trucks, or snowmobiles in Canada, and there is great potential for job creation. Some of these companies also partner with local suppliers, further contributing to growth by generating thousands of indirect jobs. For example, Lion Electric has approximately 300 Canadian suppliers. Ainsi, bien que l'accent soit mis sur les véhicules électriques,
while the U.S. government's proposals mainly target light-duty vehicles, they may also affect Canadian manufacturing of electric public transportation, buses, school buses, and off-road vehicles, in addition to charging stations, EV infrastructure, R&D, and so on. As a result, tens of thousands of current and future jobs in the EV industry could be transferred to or created in the U.S., leaving Canada with crumbs. The future of transportation is clearly electric, whether for light, medium, or heavy-duty vehicles. The federal government knows it, the industry knows it, and the scientists know it. That is why Canada, its industry partners, and the U.S. all need to work together to make sure that we too have a plan to develop a thriving EV industry like the one that was signed a year ago. Nearly day to day. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Vice Chairs, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you on this very important matter. I'm here on behalf of Toyota Motor Manufacturing Canada, and I have responsibility for external affairs for all of Toyota's operations across Canada, including our interactions and engagement with all levels of government. Team MC has been building vehicles in Canada since 1988, and this summer we will build the 10 millionth vehicle in our history, expected to be our newly launched Lexus NX. We've been the largest automotive manufacturer in Canada over the past 5 years, and last year we were responsible for nearly 40% of all vehicle manufacturing in Canada, producing more than 427,000 vehicles despite significant well-known challenges to global supply chains. We employ more than 8,500 Canadians, and we are the most awarded plant in the Americas and second most awarded in the world from J.D. Power and Associates Initial Quality Survey. Since our inception in Canada, our mission has been to build high-quality vehicles for the North American marketplace. Since 1988, we've enjoyed duty-free access into the U.S. market, first through the Canada-U.S. FTA, then NAFTA, and now CUSMA. Each of those successive agreements has allowed us to grow from a single plant producing 50,000 Corollas per year to 3 plants and 2 sites producing 500,000 vehicles per year. We are one of the largest Toyota plants operating globally and the largest Toyota plant in North America by volume. We produce the best-selling non-pickup truck in North America and the 2 top-selling vehicles within our Lexus luxury nameplate. With the addition of the Lexus NX production in March of this year, we'll build hybrid electric versions of all of our vehicles on every line. We're already producing electrified vehicles in Canada in high quantities and will continue to do so as our products continue to progress along the electrification spectrum. We're a Canadian success story. Last year, 87% of our production was exported to the United States. The U.S. market is roughly 10 times the size of the Canadian market and has a profound impact and effect on our Canadian manufacturing operations. We produce more than twice as many cars in Canada than we sell in Canada, and the latter total includes vehicles produced in the U.S., Mexico, and Japan. Continued preferential access to the U.S. market is essential for us to maintain our production profile as well as continued employment for our team members. There is no realistic scenario where we can service the Canadian market only and retain our current production levels and levels of employment. In recent years, even after the successful negotiation of NAFTA, we've seen increasing threats to our preferred access to the U.S. market. First, it was through a different and more stringent interpretation of rules of origin by the USTR, and more recently through proposed legislation in the United States that would effectively give preferred access through consumer tax rebates for qualifying electrified vehicles produced by 3 specific U.S. headquartered companies in clear violation of the CUSMA agreement recently agreed to by both countries and Mexico. The catalyst for most of this action is the clear recognition by both governments and industry that the future of automotive is electrified. The industry will be undergoing unprecedented changes as internal combustion powertrains are gradually replaced by electric motors and batteries. Each automotive company will have its own public position on the pace of electrification, some more aggressive and some more pragmatic, but there's no disagreement on the end goal of shifting to a carbon-free automotive future. Inherent in this is the understanding that batteries, 1,000-pound, 100-kilowatt batteries, and more specifically, companies' abilities to source or build them within North America will determine the future winners and losers in the automotive marketplace. Nations understand this, and the United States sees this as an opportunity to shift production of both automobiles and these new powertrains from lower-cost jurisdictions such as Mexico and overseas countries into the United States, securing jobs and technology while reshaping the automotive landscape. There's tremendous risk to Canada in this scenario, and if we're unable to maintain preferred access to the U.S. market and compete on a level playing field, investments will flow into the United States at the expense of Canada, and our industry will be further weakened. Canada must enforce its trade agreements with the United States, as well as build a Canadian value proposition that creates broader value within the North American marketplace. One way to do this is through the development of battery supply chains. This has been mentioned elsewhere, so I won't dwell on it, but we need to focus our energies on turning things in the ground into things that we can actually use. It's not enough to say we have lithium reserves in the ground in northern Quebec. We need to transform that natural resource into highly refined battery-grade material at a competitive cost. This could be a distinct advantage for Canada and a transformative opportunity for our natural resources sector. At the opposite end of the electrification spectrum, we need to find customers for batteries in Canada. There's a perception in the public space that if Canada could secure a large-scale battery manufacturing operation, that would attract battery electric vehicle assembly to Canada. This is completely backwards. We need to secure product mandates for electrified vehicles first. We need to establish a critical mass of hybrid, plug-in hybrid, and battery electric vehicle production to our plants in Canada to attract battery production mandates. Batteries, by their nature, are very large and very heavy. The associated logistics cost to ship a battery over any great distance is much greater than the powertrains that they're replacing. Once increasing volumes reach a critical mass, economics force companies to localize production close to the customer in order to overcome increasing logistics cost. This is how you attract battery plant investments, and further, how you find the true customers for your refined raw materials. These logistics challenges...
Sorry, Mr. McKenzie, I have to interrupt. Sure. Hopefully you can complete your remarks in response to one of the questions from the members. Mr. Wark, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Standing Committee, and other witnesses. My name is Shane Wark, and I am Assistant to Unifor National President Jerry Dias. My responsibilities include oversight of negotiations for Unifor's 40,000 members working at the Detroit 3 and independent auto parts facilities. Joining me today is Unifor's Director of Research, Angelo De Caro. Angelo oversees the union's work on auto sector and trade policy. We thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Unifor appreciates the committee undertaking this study on how certain U.S. Build Back Better policy proposals will harm the Canadian auto industry, notably the proposed EV vehicle rebate that applies exclusively to vehicles assembled in America. I started working at Ford Motor Company, Windsor in 1994. Having been involved in the auto industry for more than 25 years, I can tell you what drives production and investment into Canadian assembly plants is our ability to sell into the U.S. market. U.S. showrooms are the final destination for roughly 90% of passenger vehicles assembled in Canada. It makes sense. The U.S. market is significantly larger than Canada's. For example, in 2019, the U.S. sold 17 million new cars. Canada, by comparison, sold approximately 2 million new vehicles. A subsidy of $12,500 to purchase only U.S.-built electric vehicles, which amounts to a subsidy of 22% for an average electric vehicle, not only cuts Canada out of the most important market, it creates a strong disincentive to invest in Canadian electric vehicle production. As Canada is set to ramp up EV production in the coming years and seeks further investments to secure and grow our production footprint, this U.S. proposal comes at the worst time. The challenge is there is a lot to like about what the U.S. is trying to do. Getting more EVs on the road will require government support and purchasing incentives. The U.S. is clearly setting an ambitious benchmark. Ensuring that these subsidies help grow good, unionized auto sector jobs is an effort to support workers' fundamental rights. The trouble starts when Canada, the U.S.'s #1 auto trading partner, is treated as an afterthought. Resolving this matter is critical to our industry building efforts. We thank the federal government for its support so far, but there is still lots of work to do. The congressional bill has stalled, but we fear a new bill will surface. Finding a permanent and durable solution is critical as we look for solutions to sustain work at, for example, the Stellantis Brampton Assembly Plant, a 3,000 worker plant that supports thousands of regional jobs, but according to various auto analysts, has no product allocation as of 2023. It is also critical as our union begins preparations for the next round of Detroit 3 negotiations starting in the summer of next year. You can expect EV investment will once again be a key topic of discussion. The federal government has to continue making the case at all levels of government for a Canadian carve-in to any U.S. rebate. At the very least, the federal government must present assurances to auto workers that any U.S. action is balanced by equivalent support for our own domestic investment. Canada is on the cusp of something very special. We are positioning ourselves out as a powerhouse nation for the future of auto manufacturing at all stages of the supply chain, from the mining and processing of critical minerals to battery and component part production to final vehicle assembly. A stronger domestic supply chain will provide us greater leverage when dealing with isolationist trading partners like the U.S. now and in the future. Unifor is not celebrating the demise of President Biden's Build Back Better program. The derailment of a nearly $2 trillion economic growth package from our largest trading partner is bad news for Canada, in fact. But to ensure Canada doesn't get caught in the crosshairs, we need a proper industrial strategy, one that buffers us against trade threats and built to support good jobs. Thank you again for this opportunity. I look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wark, and thank you to all of the witnesses for that very valuable information. We will now start with the members of the committee. Mr. Lewis, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and to the committee. It's great to be back here and doing our very important work. Thank you to all the witnesses. Incredible testimony tonight, this afternoon, and you each brought something really unique to the table. So I just say thank you to each and every one of you for that. Obviously, as many of you know, my riding of Essex is very close to the busiest international border crossing and trade in all of North America, along with my excellent colleague, Mr. Massey. So many of my questions that I'll be focusing on are going to be with regard to our region. And although I know this is much bigger than just Windsor Essex, it's really where it starts. And so there's no reason in the world that Essex Windsor really shouldn't continue to be the global leader in not only assembly plants of today, but assembly plants of tomorrow with the EVs. So I want to say thank you to each and every one of you for that. So really interesting tonight. So I hear, $6 billion investment, $4 billion, from what I understand, for Ontario alone. But with my consultations with a few of you, at least on this call tonight, previous to this call tonight, I should say, I do understand that it's really about ensuring that we have we've aligned. We're completely aligned with the United States. And so my first question, although I guess I could go on for a long time, but I only have 6 minutes and probably just 5 now. So my first question is this. Mr. Kingston, you spoke about reducing this price gap. We got to reduce the price gap, and I understand that. And, there's been quite a bit of talk about the $12,500 potential tax rebate from the United States. I'm going to switch gears here, sir. I'm going to talk about the luxury tax. And so if we're going to reduce the price gap within Canada so we're more competitive, what would be your comments with regard to the potentially proposed luxury tax on vehicles? Because I'm only convinced that an EV is going to be north of $100,000.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis, for the question. Yeah, when it comes to boosting consumer adoption, the biggest challenge is overcoming that cost gap. And that cost gap will come down over time as the technology advances. But the reality is EVs are more expensive than an internal combustion engine vehicle. So programs like the IZEV are extremely important. A luxury tax, as is currently being proposed, that would apply to electric vehicles over $100,000, works against that. We need a suite of policies to help Canadians make that switch, and putting in place a tax that is a direct disincentive and encourages a consumer to go to an ICE vehicle in that price category works against what's ultimately the government's objective of getting to 100% ZEV sales by 2035. So we need a whole of government approach, a range of consumer incentives to try and close that gap and get more Canadians into an electric.
Thank you, Mr. Kingston. For you, Madam Chair, back to Mr. Kingston, sort of put you on the spot, sir. So I'm going to also talk about something that nobody spoke about yet. The question will be first to you and then to the representative from Unifor, please. Very concerned about chip shortages. And so I know there's been major investments downriver. So for those that don't know, downriver is on the other side of the Detroit River, down in the big assembly plants in Michigan. I do believe it to be true, Mr. Kingston, please correct me if my numbers are way million unit shortage last year, or that wasn't assembled last year due to the chip shortage. Can you advise this committee as to how both sides of the borders can work together, or what Canada needs to do to ensure that? The reason I'm asking this question, Mr. Kingston, obviously we want to produce, we want to assemble, but right in Windsor, right in my backyard, we've had major assembly plant shutdowns, right? The lines have been shut down, we're cut down to one. So just curious if you could respond to that, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Lewis. You're absolutely right. I mean, the chip shortage has been one of the biggest headwinds facing the industry since the onset of COVID and associated supply chain challenges and chip production shutdowns. Last year, we started to see towards the end of last year, third and fourth quarter, an increase in improvement with respect to chip inventories and as a result, production. However, the Delta wave, now followed by the Omicron wave of COVID, has led to another series of chip shortages, which are impacting the industry globally. So production in Canada last year was down almost 1 million units. We are hopeful that we're starting to see a light at the end of the tunnel with respect to a balance in terms of global chip production, and demand. And the U.S. is taking steps. There's currently $53 billion about to be approved to enhance U.S. chip production capacity, which will be extremely helpful for the Canadian industry as well as the U.S. industry, given the integrated nature of our auto sector. So it has been a big challenge, but I'm hopeful that we're starting to see an end to that, and you'll see production increasing and returning to pre-COVID levels.
Thank you, Mr. Kingston. Mr. Wark, did you have anything
very
to add
short,
there,
Mr. Lewis. You have 31 seconds left.
Thank you. I'll let Mr. Wark go, please, if he has anything to add.
Thank you. I will be brief. I can tell you the chip shortage has had a huge impact on the Unifor represented Detroit 3 assembly plants. We met with our leadership group just before the Christmas shutdown and calculated that among 5 assembly plants, the chip shortage has caused over 2 years worth of layoffs in that period. And I would strongly encourage our government to consider policies that would bring about chip production to Canada. I think it's a worthy discussion to have for sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Varani, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And let me just start by picking up on something that was just raised by Mr. Lewis, because I think the record should reflect that our government's track record on EVs is actually to have imposed a $5,000 tax credit for EVs that are worth $50,000 or less. And that was very deliberate because we've heard the narrative that electric vehicles are effectively a plaything of the rich, and that's not where we see the market going with things like the Leaf and the Volt. What we're trying to do is empower Canadians who are middle-class Canadians to access cars at an affordable rate, and that's why our tax credit is in place at that level and that level only. I think it's actually lamentable that when we're talking so much about tax credits, and many of you have commented on the need to ensure that we're incentivizing the Canadian market, that we don't have a provincial counterpart any longer, because the Premier of the province of Ontario, Mr. Ford, has decided to remove that tax credit. So I just wanted the record to reflect that. I'm going to pose some questions to the folks from Unifor, so Mr. Work and Mr. DeCaro. You know, on first reading of the Build Back Better legislation initiative, you know, it talked about empowering the vehicles to be bought in the United States, but particularly for the final assembly of the vehicles to occur in unionized shops. And I'm speaking to you as somebody who represents a lot of good unionized workers here in Toronto, and they're concerned about the health of the labor movement, as they rightfully should be. So at first instance, you think, okay, well, that's a positive initiative, but can you unpack for me the importance of when Ministers Ng and Minister Freeland write a pretty stern letter to their counterparts in the United States last December, indicating exactly the dramatic consequences of Build Back Better and how it would impact Canadian industry and how it is indeed discriminatory, a term that many of you have used? What would be the impact on unionized labor here on this side of the border? Because it is Canadian unionized workers who are first and foremost in terms of our priorities. So if you could comment on that to the folks from Unifor in about 90 seconds. Thanks.
Go ahead, Angelo.
Sure. Thanks very much for the question. Yeah, I think in terms of the impact, as was mentioned in Mr. Work's opening remarks, I mean, we're talking about existential threats to this industry and future investments. To close us off from our biggest trading market would be devastating. And so again, I think our advocacy in this effort has been to try to make sure, like in past and like so many things, we're included, and it's important not to disentangle Canada from the U.S. market. Aspects of this proposal were very interesting, very innovative, and I think you know, the approach that was taken to try and support you know, good jobs, high wage jobs, to make sure that that you don't have a public subsidy that was incentivizing, you know, low road employers, employers that were actively trying to thwart workers' rights to join unions, things like that. These are important pieces to build into policies. The problem is that you know, why the U.S. would think that of all the problems that can be dealt with in the world, that Canada, who again has you know, comparable rates of unionization, our wage levels are comparable, if not higher, we're not the problem, and to be caught in the crossfire of this was kind of like a double whammy to union members watching this drama unfold. So you know, I think there are ways that we can get at that kind of policy end without being so discriminatory, and hopefully you know, cooler heads prevail. If this bill does resurface, and we can have a smarter discussion about what that can look like.
Thank you, Mr. DeCaro. And just further to that point, I found it striking because in the renegotiations of CUSMA, as you guys well know at Unifor, because you were involved in it, people like Jerry and others, we went to great lengths to cooperate with the United States, particularly on things such as labor reform in Mexico. And we've taken the step of actually investing in labor reform in Mexico to the tune of $27.5 million. We've delegated 2 additional labor attachés to the Canadian diplomatic mission in Mexico. Can you comment on sort of the importance of that in terms of those kinds of investments, in terms of shoring up labor and support for unionized workers continent-wide? So Mr. DeCaro first, and Mr. Work, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think this all complements my earlier points about, you know, the last number of years, specifically through CUSMA, and that experience was a bit of a changing of the channel about how we understood the role of labor rights in continental free trade. Something another speaker, I can't recall who, but I mean, this is very innovative stuff. This is stuff that you know, doesn't exist in trade agreements anywhere else in the world. So we were breaking ground on these concepts. We're doing it in the spirit of solidarity, working with independent Mexican labor unions, with a vote in fact happening right now at a truck plant to among a series of workers, all brought about by the laws established under the CUSMA. So there's having a positive effect on this, and so it's unfortunate then that a policy like this surfaces that obviously very inward looking and isolationist, but really in practice, aims to undo a lot of that goodwill, a lot of that solidarity that was built up. So I don't know what more to say about this other than it's a disappointment. And again, hopefully there's ways to rectify this as we go forward.
Thanks. And Madam Chair, how much
Thank you
time do I
very
have?
much. I'm sorry, Mr. Vernon, your time is up. Mr.
Thank you.
Savard-Tremblay for 6 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to all of the witnesses for your presentations. It gave us a very good impression of what was going on in your various sectors as to the impact of these policies. Mr. Breton, you are president of Electric Mobility Canada, and you have also been Environment Minister for the province of Quebec. So you are very familiar with the electrification file in Quebec. Now, certainly, there's some nuances to all this. Does this mean that the light vehicle manufacturing is mainly in Ontario and the heavy vehicles are mainly in Quebec? Well, yes and no. There are certainly there's manufacturing in Manitoba, and yes, most of the expertise, I guess, is for light vehicles is in Ontario and heavy vehicles in Quebec. Are there files or are these sectors that are equally supported in the context of the difficulties that have just arisen? I wouldn't be able to tell you whether we have received equitable treatment or not. We haven't spoken about this yet, but if you look at the 2020 figures, you look at the battery production, that is the firms that manufacture these big batteries, most of them were in China. And now we are playing a geopolitical game, so it's not just a question of job creation. There's talk of national security when it comes to transferring electricity and knowledge. There have been many political issues in the gas industry, but now we have the same thing with renewable energies in the transportation sector. China has really gone ahead of the North American industry. Now, if we don't come up with a North America plan to compete with China, we are going to lose jobs, not only in Canada, but also in the U.S. That means that we're going to start importing foreign products. That means that we're going to lose a lot in the area of light and heavy vehicles. There are thousands of vehicles being produced and used in Canada, but far more in China. Here, of course, we have natural resources. We have qualified workers. We have an industry that can do the work, but we need to have an integrated vision so that we are able to compete with our competitors who are ahead of us, namely China. The same is going on in Europe. Canada and the U.S. absolutely have to work together because otherwise we're shooting ourselves in the foot. We're not heading in the right direction to improve things in the transportation sector. But we do know that there was an agreement signed between Mr. Trudeau and the American president in February 2021. We realized that 90% of the batteries come from Asia, and now we want an agreement on critical metals. And we know that there are a lot of people who are on board with this idea. So if you look at that, we have to end up in a situation here that can only be called a rhetorical question. There is a protectionist agreement, but there is nonetheless some cooperation in this field. Well, I hope that Canada will note to not make some of the mistakes that it made in the past. We do have the natural resources, we have the raw material, and we send it abroad. If we continue doing that, instead of making value-added jobs in Canada, we are not going to be in a good position. If Canada is going to send the critical metals to the U.S. and the U.S. start manufacturing the products. So basically, we need a processing industry here in Canada. It's not just a question of taking these things. In fact, we should call it a policy of reindustrialization. Yes, it's a question of supply chain. It goes from mining to mobility. We're working on that. We have set up an association. It's the Accelerated Alliance that was created last year. We want to fight climate change and atmospheric pollution while creating jobs, not while losing jobs in Canada and Quebec. That's what we want. You can see that there's real danger right now for the sector. The automobile, trucking industry, and all sorts of others. Quebec has shown that it is very willing to work on all of this. Now, do you think there is sufficient political will to help us? Are you talking about nationally or provincially, or when it comes to supporting all Canadians? I think that the federal government really wants to move these projects forward. We have had discussions with the former Canadian ambassador to Washington, and we spoke with Minister Ng, and she said we can't tolerate this because it doesn't make any sense. We're supposed to be business partners. We're not supposed to be opponents. When it comes to energy transformation, we're not opponents. We're supposed to work together to help our region on the geopolitical front and economic front. Thank you very much. All right, thank you.
Please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Monsieur Breton, can you kind of convey where like transferable technology could be with investment in Canada, especially in battery enhancements? It's not just about the vehicles, it's also about what can take place after. Can you provide some information on that?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Could you repeat exactly, just so I know what you're talking about?
Thank you. Just looking for, in terms of where we go from, like, it's not just vehicles, but it's also about battery enhancements.
Yeah.
Where can they go to other products in manufacturing in Canada if we actually produce them here ourselves versus being dependent on all those things? It's all the stuff that's out there in terms of.
Well, I mean, obviously, there's critical minerals in many provinces across the country, from Alberta to BC to Saskatchewan to Ontario to Quebec. There's expertise in different universities. I mean, we go from Dalhousie University with Jeff Dan Research Center to Quebec to Ontario. In hydrogen, there's BC, because we tend to forget that when we talk about electric vehicles, it's also hydrogen vehicles as well. So there is expertise across the board. And when we're talking electric vehicles, we're talking, yes, batteries, but we're also talking critical minerals. We're talking about propulsion systems. We're talking about infrastructure. We tend to forget, but infrastructure are a key component of electric mobility. And right now, when we're talking to some of our members, what they're saying to me is, well, if the Build Back Better plan comes as presented initially, we'll basically have to move our plants from Canada to the US, or just plainly open in the US, and that's it. So to them, since some of them are already doing business both south and north of the border, they're just saying, less jobs in Canada, more jobs in the US. So that's why it's very important for us at all levels of electric mobility.
Yeah. Mr. DeCaro, like in terms of our footprint with the United States, where has it gone? We are right now supposedly 13%, but I don't think it's that high in terms of actually auto manufacturing anymore. That's what was actually based on the previous work we did with regards to support for investment for General Motors and also Ford and also a series of the Chrysler, but I don't think we're there anymore.
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. I think it's right to say that over time, depending on what time frame you're looking at, but Canada's share of the North American production footprint has fallen. I think a lot of that can be explained just over time, at least a 20-year time frame, with rising assembly capacity built in Mexico with new greenfield sites. Roughly, timed with the onset of NAFTA a number of years later. So we have seen declines. They've borne out in employment numbers. We're about 35,000 assembly and parts jobs short of where we were at the turn of the millennia. So it's a longer time frame, but still significant. And only until recently were we seeing an uptick in some of that and some green shoots with the the Oshawa assembly coming back online and new product investments coming to Oakville, Ingersoll, and then soon to be coming to Windsor. But things like this throw a huge wrench in those plans at again, the worst possible time you can imagine. So yeah, I would agree with your statement.
And this is a challenge that we face with this is that even Detroit has actually had more investment versus all of Canada over the last number of years. And that's just one city versus our entire country. So where do we go in terms of, Mr. Kingston, I'm going to ask you this one question. Like, where do we go in terms of actually rebranding and also importantly, kind of making sure that we're not going to be like a subsidiary of the United States in terms of assembly?
Thank you for the question. First, I just want to underline Canadian production as a result of, as a percentage of total North American production was about 13% through the period, the decade up to 2019. The last few years aren't really good examples of numbers because of course, the semiconductor situation. We've also seen significant new investment in Canada. $6 billion is something to be really proud of. And I just for the record would like to note greatly appreciative of the support of the federal government, ICED, and the Ontario government in helping make those investments happen. That said, on a go-forward basis, obviously, we want to maintain our position in terms of North American production and attract as much investment as possible. And to do that, I'll go back to my opening remarks. We've got to have a competitive manufacturing environment. This investment is highly, highly competitive. Companies are competing, jurisdictions are competing around the world to attract it. And if we're not constantly aware of where we sit with respect to other jurisdictions in North America in particular, we won't be able to continue to compete. So we've got to look at our regulatory environment, and we have to make sure that we are aligned with the United States. To the points that have been raised here earlier, the majority of our vehicles go to the U.S. market. If we don't have a regulatory environment that is competitive with the U.S. and aligned with the U.S., we won't win new investments. So that has to be the overarching objective of any auto strategy.
Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry, Mr. Massey, the time is up. On to Mr. Hoback, or the Conservative side. Mr. Martel? Okay, thank you. Mr. Martel? Okay.
Oui. Alors, je vous remercie d'être ici avec nous aujourd'hui. J'aurais une question.
Thank you for joining us today. I have a question for Mr. Vicio. I was wondering whether the government consulted you to see how it could better support the industry to deal with the American tax credits or to react to any other external threat. If so, what are your recommendations?
The government the federal government has, like I said in my opening remarks, are alive to this issue. And we've been working closely together with them, with the embassy in Washington, to be able to be in front of the lawmakers that this bill is going to be in front of in whatever new form that it comes in. And, I would suggest or continue to recommend we ask the government to say, look, this is going to be a problem. When this issue started to rise, and said this, if we don't get in front of this now, and be hyper vigilant about it because it's such a binary threat, then we're going to have issues down the line. Obviously, automakers, as my colleagues have said, they're making decisions for the future now. And my recommendations would be to continue the course, continue to make sure that, one, we remind our American friends about their trading obligations to us, to each other, and then two, really reminding and kind of making sure that they care about this issue, in that this is going to affect them in an adverse way, just as, and if not worse, affecting us.
Merci. Encore.
Thank you. Another question for you, Mr. Vessio. On the 11th of November 2021, you participated in panel's title, "Is it possible to replace the raw materials from Asia by a local producer?" You said that we had the capability to do so in Canada, but there are some gaps, and that the Canadian government should change its perspective and start trying to find value in other areas besides just looking at the costs. Now, you are saying that there should be a way to control the process. How do you think Canada, the government, is lacking in leadership in this file?
I would simply say that these issues aren't in a vacuum, and decisions by multinational corporations are not necessarily done with one issue in mind. I think with respect to understanding the value proposition in Canada, knowing that there is the things that that are in the ground that can go in the car are essential to understand that investment here makes sense. I would say that it's imperative for all governments of both stripes, which we've been working with, both from the provincial side and the federal side, to understand that making our jurisdiction as attractive as possible, for all of the reasons that everybody else has said on this panel, is essential, and continue to do that, and continue to sell Canada as the place to be for auto production.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Vessio. My next question is for Mr. Kingston. In July 2021, Stellantis said it was going to build 5 plants to make the batteries required for electric vehicles, of which 2 would be in North America. At least one of them would be built in the U.S. In my view, it is inconceivable that Canada has all of these batteries that Quebec has developed, and that there hasn't been any announcement about a plant. And in fact, we may end up not having any plants. Do you think Canada is lacking in its leadership functions to attract foreign investors?
No, I think that the federal government in particular has done a lot of work in terms of attracting investment in the battery sector. We obviously don't know what the outcome of Stellantis's plans for a battery footprint in North America are, but I think there is great potential that we could see at some point a battery investment in Canada. And for all the reasons that some of the other witnesses have outlined, we do have all of the materials, the supply chain is there, but we've got to move quickly to go from kind of speaking about what we know are the resources in the ground to building mining capacity, and in particular processing capacity to ultimately feed those plants and then go into final vehicle assembly. So I think the opportunity is there, and I'm still hopeful that we could see some investments made in Canada.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martel. Sorry, your time is up. On to Mr. Sheehan for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all our presenters. And I just wanted to begin, by talking about something that's in my backyard, the steel industry. And we saw what happened when there was some American protectionism with the 232, and that was not only on steel but aluminum. And we all worked together in this trade committee, and we went forward and had a real team approach, and got in the face literally of American legislatures and businesses, unions, and talked about it. And some of the stuff that we talked about was the supply chains and how it would affect the auto industry. How many times a part crosses a piece of a car back and forth through the border, through the auto pact, and how it would inadvertently become a tax on Americans and have unconsequences, effects of rising up prices and such. So as we move forward with electric vehicles, we're starting to see the investments that happen in the Sioux and Hamilton, where we're moving from coal-based manufacturing as it relates to steel to electric arc, reducing our carbon, because manufacturers the consumer is actually demanding, that, and that you're seeing that increase. So my question and first question is, and we've seen investments in Northern Ontario at first cobalt up in the Temiskaming area with cobalt sulfate manufacturing that'll go into electric vehicles. So I want to first pose my question: the Canadian auto manufacturer parts person, talking about the Auto Pact and what have been the benefits of this free flow of goods across the border, and where do you see it going sort of in the future? So I'll start with that question first.
Sorry, was that to you, Jean Paulo?
As you pose that to me, Mr.
Yes,
Sheehan?
please. Yep, and both you can take a stab at it if you like. That's fine. Just I would like that comments.
Yeah, I don't think there's no secret as to how interconnected the American and Canadian auto sectors are. I mean, we will belay this point forever, and I think we know where the future's going. I just had a daughter; she's 8 months old, and she'll probably never start a car that goes and then starts in her life. And so, I think that understanding the importance of our two countries and how for the last 100 years we've almost seamlessly operated as one sector is imperative to the prosperity of us all in the sector. And I think that the government understands that. I think that's why they're extremely live to this issue with respect to the Build Back Better bill. I think we need to also take a step back and look that this bill is being brought with a plethora of other issues and measures in it, and this EV tax credit is only one piece. And we also have to be live to the political realities in the United States. But I think that we're kind of halfway in the game here. We're kind of halfway. We're probably at halftime with respect to this process. And I think that continuing to make sure that that both the American automotive sector, the American administration understand how imperative of a measure this is and how it will affect them. I think appealing to the American interest is the way in which we kind of drive this point home.
And if I could just delve down into that, because one of the things that we made sure to underline and highlight was that China has a certain elements of capitalism, but it's a lot of a command-based economy, whereby they subsidize their steel industry so much that the results in dumped steel. So it was always our intention, and we always told the Americans, is we'll wall up together and have that in place. So I guess my supplementary question is about the China as a competitor as it relates to electric vehicles, and how it would be beneficial for the United States, Canada, and Mexico to be aware of that and to continue to work together, because we all have things that we bring to the table that make cars produced in North America the best cars in the world. So,
who would you like to answer that question? You have 11 seconds remaining.
Okay, that might have been more of a statement too, but I think I see a lot of nodding heads agreeing yes, but I'll leave it. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you very much. On to Monsieur Savard Tremblay for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to finish the conversation that I was having with Mr. Breton. I wanted to ask you, and in fact, you really were right in talking about the batteries. I would like to deal with that and not just the question of selling the vehicles. The issue behind that is what you are saying is a question of security. It's a geopolitical. Perhaps you could tell this committee how important and fundamental it is. Well, basically, you have a tendency to talk about critical minerals and renewable energies, but there's a whole plethora of electric vehicles that need all sorts of things, be it the chips that are used in computers now or elsewhere. In fact, the Pentagon had already talked about this. When it's a question of critical minerals, the strategic importance is to have a control over the extraction and transportation of the minerals and how it's used in the processing and manufacturing of products. At Mobility Canada, we see this as a national security issue. When we say that most of the processing of critical minerals is being done in China, then you're talking about arms, weapons, the medical sector, and this could actually become a critical playing card for Canada, in that if you want to say that Canada could become a major processor of parts for U.S. cars, that would be great. We want to play an important role especially in terms of national security, and Americans are very much aware of that, especially given the current situation in the relationship between the U.S. and China. Given the conversations that you have had with some Americans, where is the sticking point? Well, the impression that we have is that the U.S. is making plans with a look at their internal policies. We're not really in the future vision of the Americans, and this is really bad for our longer-term vision for the environment and our national policies in general. The Americans have to understand that there are benefits for all of us in very many areas. It's in our best interest to work together.
Minutes, please.
Mr. DeCaro, Mr. Work, it's been raised about the Auto Pact. The Auto Pact actually was something that was negotiated as an international agreement between Canada and the United States. Where do you think we are now versus what we gave up with NAFTA and other negotiations? But right now, we've actually kind of returned to a lower position, in my opinion.
I can take a first stab at that, Mr. Massey, and then maybe Shane will jump in. Yeah, it's a bit open-ended question. There's a long history to the Auto Pact, and to some extent, we're dealing with right now the product of that decision we made in 1965 was to build an integrated North American industry, and I guess that works insofar as the bigger trading partner of the two is well aligned with sort of principled approaches to the free movement of goods between borders. The minute they want to close down, then it changes the calculus. One of the really important pieces of the Auto Pact were the individual covenants that were struck between each of the OEMs, the automakers, to commit them to value-added production in Canada and so forth. And of course, all of that sort of managed trade approach died away under NAFTA, and then firmly destroyed under the WTO. So we're sort of swimming in murky waters, and again, kind of gets masked when the U.S. is willing to play ball, but when they don't want to anymore, we're having this a bit of a rethink about how we approached trade. So I think, without getting into a long diatribe on this, but we talk about industrial policy, we talk about the situation we're faced with now. If trade policy isn't factored into that larger conversation of a suite of things we have to consider about how we move forward effectively, I think we're missing a key piece of this. So I don't know if Shane wants to supplement that.
Yeah, I'll just give you
20 seconds, Mr. Mark.
Okay, I'll be quick. With the loss of the agreement in 2002. In 1999, we were at our peak of vehicle assembly in Canada, and following the loss of the agreement that we had with the U.S. In 2002, the production declined, plants closed, workers lost their jobs, families were upended. So I think the history of the trade speaks for itself. It has not been good since the loss of those important trade agreements.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Patzer for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kingston, I just would like you to clarify a statement that you made, and that was in regards to supply chains already being in existence for electric vehicle batteries in Canada. I'm just wondering if you could clarify that statement.
Sorry, I was pointing to the fact that there is huge potential to build an electric vehicle supply chain as OEMs build out their North American battery manufacturing to support all the vehicles that they're going to be building. We have all of the ingredients. We just have to put in place the strategy.
Okay. I guess this question would be for you and maybe also for Mr. Vesio. In the CUSMA deal, there was a 3-year provision that we could source lithium regionally tariff-free. But given that and we heard testimony in Natural Resources Committee last year that we're closer to 10 years in order to actually get this production or this industry going to the point where it's actually producing something. Are you concerned about that?
Yes, absolutely. And some of the other witnesses have made the point that China has been far more advanced in terms of coming forward with a battery supply strategy. So we are behind in terms of building out a critical mineral processing and mining industry in this country. That said, we have the resources, and we're a trusted partner of the United States in terms of being a source of those inputs. So we are behind, absolutely, but I think the opportunity is still very much there, particularly when you look at the forecast for EV production over the next 15 years. This is a fundamental transformation, and demand is going to be significant.
Mr. Vesio?
Yeah, I agree with everything Mr. Kingston said. I think that understanding that the potential is here and is here now, making those decisions, like I was suggesting before, decisions now are made for the future, and being live to that issue in the immediate, like now, I think is prudent, and the opportunity is only upside. I think with the measures that we negotiated in the CUSMA, it also gives us that runway to be able to sort of attract and find those investments.
Yeah, so unfortunately, we're going to completely miss that 3-year window to source tariff-free. But what's the biggest regulatory burden that we face to get this battery supply chain going and up and running? Mr. Vesio and Mr. Kingston, either one of you could answer that one.
I'm happy to just very quickly note that, and I would defer to my colleagues over in the mining industry, but the processing time associated with opening up, exploring, and then opening up a new mine, for example, for cobalt, we do have a very long process. It's a process that's dedicated at ensuring, of course, that we respect environmental rights, proper consultation takes place. That all is extremely important, but the timelines are long in Canada for new project development. That's just the reality.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Vesio, do you have anything you want to add to that, or is there anybody else in the panel that wants to add to that?
I would simply say also too that the investments needed in order to for that type of mining and that type of processing also needs to be anchored with on the other side with vehicle production orders, vehicle production allocation. And so I think that there is this little bit of chicken egg situation, getting around that and seeing the possibility of sort of avoiding those issues, perhaps will probably bring a little bit more clarity.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Kingston. One other issue that I kind of see here, yeah, we're aiming for 100% by 2035. That's what the government has stated as a possibility. But one thing I find interesting, there's been a study in California showing up to 20% of EV drivers ultimately end up switching back to gas. So do you think we could see that happening in Canada, particularly the climate that we live in?
Yeah, thank you. I'm very familiar with that study, and the primary reason for drivers switching back is due to convenience issues related to charging infrastructure. And I would point to that study as a warning for Canada. We've set an ambitious target. We need to build charging infrastructure faster than the rate at which people are buying EVs, because all it takes is someone to purchase an EV, they make that decision, they make the investment, And if they have even just one or two very, very bad experiences where they find themselves in a 2 or 3 hour wait, which has happened in some areas in California for charging, that will very quickly turn them off the technology. So we have to avoid that, and we can get ahead of it. If we build out the charging infrastructure very aggressively right now, that won't happen, but that's going to be important. And to your point about Canada being cold weather, battery performance is affected, so we're going to have to really be thoughtful about how much charging infrastructure we need, particularly in more northern and rural communities, to avoid that situation. That is a worst case outcome.
Thank you, Mr. Kingston. Thank you. On to Mr. Raya for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, a bit of a fact. Today is the production problem when it comes to electric vehicles. It's not the sales problem. That there is no subsidy for the buyers, so that is the reason that is affecting the usage of electrical vehicles is a nonsense. Tesla, the biggest manufacturer, is selling every car it manufactures. The legacy automakers are way, way behind in electrical vehicle manufacturing, but even them are not finding it difficult to make their sales. Mr. Kingston, I'm quite surprised that you endorsed a misleading and partisan attack on the luxury tax, as though the luxury tax is preventing the people from buying luxury electrical vehicles. Where is the production? Where is the supply? However, on the question of charging infrastructure, I 100% agree with you. In fact, if we have to put more focus, investment today, immediately, it should be on the charging infrastructure. The charging infrastructure should be ready, especially for the Canadian environment. Mr. McKenzie, you mentioned we should focus on vehicles manufacturing first and batteries next. But is it not a fact that 8 or 10 multi-billion-dollar investments in battery manufacturing in the US, they're all joint ventures? Anyway, we'll come to that. And Mr. Breton, welcome back to the committee. In the last parliament, we had good discussions on this issue. Yeah. As you know that Canada, because we all know that Canada and US, we have this joint action plan for critical minerals collaboration. And also the federal government invested in the critical battery minerals center of excellence. And we have also invested in research and development to advance critical battery mineral processing and refining expertise. You know, the agreement is good. Our investment announcement is good. Are you seeing any movement at the ground level on this?
You're asking the question to me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Actually, I am seeing some movement. I've had discussion with Minister Champagne in the last few months. I know that the federal government is working very hard to be able to make some interesting announcements. We've seen some smaller announcements, but nevertheless significant in Quebec with Lion, the battery plant. And we are seeing companies that want to invest in either cell manufacturing or battery pack manufacturing. So I'm confident that Canada will be able to land the production of EV batteries. Obviously, I mean, this Build Back Better plan is a threat. I'm convinced that it could defer some investment or deter, and divert it to the United States. So that's one thing that is really concerning to us. If you don't mind, about the fact that to buy an electric car you have to have $100,000 EV doesn't make sense. I mean, most people that drive electric cars, I mean, it's between like $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. I mean, this $100,000 nonsense. I can't believe I'm hearing this. Or the fact that we're saying, if we live in Canada, it's really hard to travel when you go across the country in an EV. I drove from Berthierville to Toronto. I'm here in Toronto today, 640 kilometers in a full EV with 4 people in the car and the dog. No issue at all. So there's a lot of misconceptions regarding EVs nowadays.
In fact, Mr. Britton, you're right.
Very short, Mr. Raya. You have 40 seconds left.
Okay, I'll just make a comment then. Mr. Breton, you're right. The biggest electrical vehicle manufacturer today, Tesla, their focus is to go down to the car which the masses can use, and the target price is $25,000.
Yeah.
So that is the way. I know there's no time, but we all talk about the mines to mineral processing to battery manufacturing. But the time required for the approval to operate a new mine is so long. Maybe that is a question that can be addressed by another committee or other people. I don't see any mining representatives here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, on to Mr. Hoback for 5 minutes. Yes, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, Chair, I think this new format's actually working fairly well. It looks like we're getting through more people in the time frame that we're getting, so so far so good. I'm going to start off with Mr. Vesio, I believe it is. When Build Back Better was actually becoming legislation, when did the industry inform the government that there was a problem, a possible problem? When did you let them know that say, hey, you need to insert yourself here to make sure that this doesn't go through? Do you have a sense of that? And maybe Mr. Kingston, you could answer that question too, or I'll start with you, Mr. Vesio.
Yeah, so I can say that we've been working closely with the government since, I would say, probably the fall, when kind of we were hearing the rumors that this type of measure would be implemented, and it's been a continuous. It's a
long period.
Continuous
Can you give
work.
me a month or roughly a more exact timeline? Like, there must have been a time when you picked up the phone and said, Mr. Ambassador or Minister, we've got a problem here.
Yeah, I can find out for you. I don't know the exact date.
But give me a sense. October, November?
Yeah, probably in and around the fall. So yeah, October or November, or in and around.
And then if you give me the exact date, I appreciate it. The reason I asked that is the minister asked myself and a member of the NDP and the member of the Bloc Party to go down with her to talk about this. And I've done this in the past with the Liberal government and been very successful with Mr. Easter or Mr. Leslie, where we've gone together into meetings together to talk on from a Canadian perspective on why this would be a bad piece of legislation or we need to get changes. This time when I went down, it seemed really disorganized. There was no game plan put in place. The minister had her own meetings that we weren't included in, and we were stuck with different council generals in their meetings, which was okay, but I was in a meeting with a bunch of Republicans that were already going to vote against it. So I looked at it and said, well, where am I contributing to fighting for our Canadian automotive manufacturers? And I found it frustrating. And now when you talk about this bill still kind of sitting there dwindling, one of the comments I had from different members of the Senate that we met with was, why are you guys inserting yourself now? Why didn't you insert yourself in the writing stage so that actually could have been changed? Because there was not a genuine thought going into, say, let's screw Canada over and put this in here. They just didn't think of us. Can you give me some idea why it would be that way?
I can't really make a comment on timelines or rationales. What I can say is that in the meetings that I've been privy to and being down in Washington and making our counterparts, our senatorial and Republican representatives live to the issue, which for a lot of times this, because the bill is so big and there's so many pieces to it, it's easy for it to pass through the eyes. I can say that once the issue was raised with a significant amount of vigor, that a lot of the representatives that we were speaking to really were taken aback and said, okay, we're really going to consider this. I mean, I can even say, as of right now, Flavio, my president, is in Washington on this very matter. So we're in the middle of it. The process is continuing. I
minority government here,
that
that's where I get frustrated. It is a minority government here. So if he's down there in Washington now, I want to help him. But if he's not talking to me, I can't give him any help. There's members in the Republican side that we could link into and assist in, but nobody's asking us to. And when we are asked to, we're kind of put in the corner. So how do I help you when I'm in the corner? And where I'm getting really frustrated is I see how serious this is. And I understand the dynamics in Washington. I understand that we're going to go into midterms. We're going to lose our ability to talk to anybody in the House here within the next month or two. I also understand a lame duck president is probably going to result of the midterms, and the Democrats feel they need to get this through now. But it doesn't seem to me that this government or the bureaucrats down in Washington understand the importance of political active politicians who talk to other politicians and what we can do to help you in this industry. So how do I get that message across? And do think Mr. Fabio could get that message across to the minister.
I think while I can, the way we operate at the APMA, we have no secrets. We do everything in the public, and the phone line is always open. If you're ever looking to have more in-depth discussion with Mr. Volpe and our team, and I would say that we are at. I can appreciate the wanting to sort of do a pre-op on our processes or on the processes that have taken place with this issue, but the issue is still alive. We're in the middle of it, and it's still continuing, and we're still going to continue working close with government on both levels to make sure that the measures that are adverse to Canada aren't enacted.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is you've got a strong group of people in the opposition side on the Bloc and NDP and myself who want to help you, who are not being engaged.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hoback. On to Mr. Mayo for 5 minutes. I think you're on. You're probably on mute, Mr. Mayo.
No, thank you very much. And I'd like to address this and speak a little bit more about how the Canada and U.S. relationship in electrical vehicle industry has really directly impact our Canadians who work in this industry. And over this conversation, I've understand that there's a lot of reliance on electric batteries and chips that is coming outside of North America. If we have any plans on putting in investment, and what will be the timeline if we were to create parts like this in Canada?
Who would like to answer that question?
Yeah. Well, I could say that we could inspire ourselves from what's being done in Europe. So they've decided to work together on a ZEV supply chain, for Europe. And a couple of years, things have really accelerated, and now they're on their way moving forward, building battery plants. So they are moving at a very fast pace. So they're actually passing in front of us. And I think that we really have to see that the timeline is short, because right now things are really evolving quickly regarding this new technology. And what we're seeing is that if we keep talking about this and we don't have a plan and we don't work with the US, we'll be left in the dust, because China is way ahead, Korea is way ahead, and Europe now is really serious about this.
And to further that question, other than relying on the relationship with US, is there a potential that we can also work with other countries around the world to expand on these technology? And really, Canada being so big and in rural areas without the electric charging infrastructure, it can be difficult down the road for the transition into electric vehicle.
Well, to that particular question, obviously, I agree with Brian Kingston. We do need more infrastructure to make sure that Canadians can go from sea to shiny sea across the country in electric vehicle. But the issue regarding infrastructure, I think, is something that can be addressed quite easily, especially in rural areas. I live in the country myself. I don't have any issue in Quebec with infrastructure. So BC and Quebec and even some regions of Atlantic Canada are ahead of the curve. So the other provinces could be inspired by what's happening within those provinces. But to say that, it's hard to travel when you live in the country, actually, it's a bit harder when you own an electric vehicle and you live in downtown Toronto or downtown Calgary, and you don't have access to a charger because you live in a condo building or an apartment building, MURBs, we call them. So this is another target, another challenge that we addressed and we spoke to the federal government about. But I think a lot has to do with education as well. It's yes, infrastructure, yes, rebates, but education is key, because I'm hearing a lot of comments from people saying, well, we live in Canada, it's really hard to travel an electric vehicle. As I just said, I just traveled 630 kilometers in an EV, which is not a Tesla, by the way, with a family, with the dog, across Ontario and Quebec. So the technology is really, really evolving really quickly. 10 years ago, the average EV had 120 kilometers of range. Now we're between 400 500 kilometers, and it's going up and up and up as the price is going down as well. So the technology is evolving a lot more quickly than people think.
Thank you, Mr. Brenton. And one more follow-up question with regards to electric charging station. As I noticed, there are several charging stations around our nation, especially in around my area, that has been vandalized. And if this persists, and how do we avoid situation like this to happen in future? As gas station, they usually have staff, really looking after the gas station, but charging vehicle is really just by itself, possibly in a remote area that nobody will really have 24-hour surveillance on.
Funny you should mention that, but there's a company called Parkland, which is a very big player in gas stations across the country. And they just announced yesterday that they will be building the first electric charging hub in the country in the next few months, because they see this as the future of electric mobility infrastructure. And it's going to be a place where there's going to be activities, there's going to be light, there's going to be food. So the future of infrastructure is not going to be, behind the parking lot where nobody sees anything and it's not lit, So things are going to evolve really quickly regarding infrastructure. That's stuff that Charge Point and Flow and Circuit Electric and EVgo and many infrastructure providers are working on right now with some gas station gas station companies because they see that this is the future. So it's going to evolve really quickly. Already it's evolving.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
To all of the witness. That was the beginning of a study that's very important, and I think your message came across very clear to all of us. All right, so if to our committee, if they could just hold on a few minutes while our witnesses excuse themselves from the meeting. We have a few minutes of committee business that we have to deal with. Thank you all. Are we okay to start? The members have received the hard copy that are in the room. The committee will now proceed to the consideration of matters relating to committee business left off from last meeting that we had. I just need to say that we are not in camera. We are in public session. We don't have time to switch to in camera, so we are in public. Monsieur Savard-Tremblay, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Following your suggestion to review the motion, there was some discussion, and it is amended. I know that you got it via email, but I was wondering whether I needed to read it.
Conformément à l'article 100.
The motion reads as follows, that pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake a study on Canadian mining companies abroad, particularly with respect to the environment and human rights, that the committee invite the Minister of International Trade, Export, Promotion, Small Business and Economic Development, or experts whom the committee deems relevant, that the committee hold a minimum of 3 meetings, and that the meeting report its findings and recommendations to the House. Thank you.
Mr. Savard-Tremblay. Any discussion? Mr. Hoback?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I guess I'm disappointed, Mr. Tremblay. In the last meeting, you said you're going to amend your motion and reach out to us and talk to us, yet I didn't hear anything from you. There was no email, no phone call or anything. And it's hard for me to support something now, when you said you're going to come back and talk to me first before you brought it back to committee, and you didn't do that. So the Conservatives won't be voting for this.
Mr. Sheehan.
Just for the record, I can confirm that Monsieur Savard Tremblay reached out to the parliamentary secretary that's on this committee, Reef, and there was some discussion. So I can just say that that happened with us. So I'm just confirming that.
Well, thank you. But for Mr. Savard Tremblay, when you're, just for a point of information, when you're trying to get something through, it's best to reach out to all members in the committee or the other vice chairs in the committee. It often makes for things moving along much smoother. So, any further discussion on the motion by Mr. Savard Tremblay? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hands. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Savard Tremblay, did you want to say something briefly? You have the floor.
Yes, I just wanted to mention. Can you hear me? Yes. Indeed. I tried. I hear a lot of echo. I don't know if this is audible to everybody else. I did speak with a parliamentary secretary. I also tried to call Mr. Hoback. I agree that I should have left a message, especially since my cell phone does not list my number. So I've certainly noted down his suggestion and his comments. The parliamentary secretary said he would try to contact Mr. Hoback. So that is why I didn't insist any further, since there should have been contact made by not a co-presenter of the motion, but by somebody else. With regard to Mr. Macy, we didn't manage to connect. We did exchange emails, and we didn't have enough time to get in touch personally.
Any further comments? All those in favor of Mr. Savard Tremblay's motion, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Opposed?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, so it does carry. All right, the motion does carry. Okay, thank you all very much for your cooperation today in getting through everything on our agenda. Mr. Hoback's indicated that he liked having 6 witnesses at one time, that it gave us more time, and as long as I can keep everybody on point, we make sure that everybody gets 1 or 2 chances to ask their important questions. So, all right. Thank you all very much. We will see you on Monday. Have a good weekend. And the minister will be here, I believe, on Monday with her officials. So, all right. Thank you all very much. Meeting adjourned.
Bye.